Okay, hi. So today I am going to be doing a very late wrap-up for my May reads. Okay, so the first two books I'm going to be talking about are the first two books in a series. That is Mistborn Era 2, and the books are Ally of Law and Shadows of Self. So these come after the first era, Mistborn. These kind of take off from, not directly from where you end Era 1 Mistborn. They take place, I think, like about 400 years in the future that is left behind the events that happen at the end of First Era. You are following two characters who are lawmen of sorts, Wax and Wayne. This is the Wax and Wayne series. It is 4 books long. They are quite a bit shorter than Mistborn Era 1, and they are much different in tone. These are kind of like Western style. You're kind of seeing this, like almost like you're kind of living through like the industrialization of this place. You see the city. You know that through the lifetime of your main character, it is grown exponentially. Electricity gets introduced, cars get introduced. Tonally, the world, I guess the world building is quite different from First Era. Another, I think, big difference is the magic systems at play. You still kind of are working off of the same magic systems, but the magic systems themselves are interacting with each other in different ways, which I found really fascinating because we were able to get more world building via the magic systems than what we were actually introduced in the first book. And you're able to see the connections between the magic systems that add additional layers of intrigue and additional layers of like conflict. So I thought that was really cool. You know, overall, these are just like fun books. You kind of have a curmudgeon-y main character, Wax. You have his kind of sidekick, Wayne, who is really like funny and adds a lot of like he adds a lot of humor to the dynamic. I think that sometimes it kind of edges, it like lands on an edge of like, he's too overdone or he's too much of a caricature, but for some people, it's gonna go over the line. For me, it kind of like edges right there, and then he has moments where you get a deepening of his character, so he doesn't really feel flat. Yeah, I overall think that this series is really fun. I thought the first book was stronger for me than the second book, but the ending of the second book was like a really interesting plot twist that like kind of harkens back to things in the first book. I really love that the world that they set up have so many ties back to the world of First Era, so it's kind of like you have all these Easter eggs kind of hidden within the novel that you can like gain an appreciation for the world and how it developed and built. You have the same kind of tones on religion. The themes of religion that are present in the first era kind of still stick around in the second era, but you're kind of seeing it through a different lens. Overall, I think that the books have been really fun. I've heard really good things about the third book, which I am part of the way through right now. So yeah, overall, really enjoyed them. I do hear that people are disappointed by the second era. I took quite a large break between first era and second era, so I'm not sure if that's what kind of helped me not compare the two, but I think that you just can't expect them to be the same books. You can't expect him to be trying to do the same thing with second era as he did with first. We'll just keep on Brandon Sanderson, because I also read his secret book, whatever, The Year of Sanderson, his second book, The Frugal Wizards Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. Again, I got the hardcover of these, and they are really beautiful. I can kind of show that off. So really nice cover, really nice, yeah. This one had a lot more kind of like artwork throughout it, like on the pages, like that type of thing. So yeah, overall, the actual like creation of the book is quite beautiful. In terms of actual plot, I'll go with like the premise of the universe. So this takes place in a modern, a postmodern world where technology has ramped up. People have discovered the multiverse, and they are being used in a corporate fashion, and you can buy your own dimension. And all dimensions that get purchased for the most part are medieval England. But they're medieval England adjacent, so there's like slight differences. And people kind of choose what they want to do with the dimension that they buy. And you follow a man who enters a dimension, and you have an amnesia trope, so he doesn't really know who he is. So you're discovering who he is with him. He goes on a quest, and that's basic premise. It's much more science fiction, I would say, than fantasy, although it does have fantasy elements to the narrative. Overall, I thought it was fun, but it was one of my least favorite Brandon Sanderson books. It was just I would say it's like a very straightforward quest novel. So Brandon Sanderson doesn't do what he's typically known to do in this book, where he kind of turns tropes on their head. And it's a very like straightforward narrative. And I think that that's what kind of just like, there's like the fun aspect of that if you're really just looking to read a quest narrative. But the other part of the book that made it less enjoyable for me was the main character. They were just a bit annoying and had this quirk where they would rate things, and it was very tired very quickly. So yeah, overall, I would not recommend that as an entry point into Brandon Sanderson. I wouldn't really, recommend. I guess it was fine. It was fine. Okay, moving on to the nonfiction I read in May. How to Hide an Empire, A History of the Greater United States. This is a hard book for me to kind of suss out. It is an interesting premise in that the United States is an empire, and culturally, we don't really consider ourselves an empire, and so it's all about how the idea of empire and what the empire actually looks like has been hidden. So it's a book of 3 parts. Empire, as in continental United States, kind of, taking over indigenous lands after colonizing, like in the colonies, gaining independence from Britain. And then there is kind of the U.S. and empire outside of the continental United States, so colonies that were never really defined as colonies, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, Guam. I'll have the cover up. All of these places are kind of talked about in some capacity. The third part is kind of like empire via influence and globalization. I think that there were a lot of really great facts presented in this book. There were a lot of things that myself as a reader I didn't really know about in terms of colonies and colonization and the concept of empire within the United States. I think that for part 1, though, the colonization of the continental United States, there are better books to read on that subject of the stealing of indigenous lands. I don't think that this is the right book to come to if you are trying to gain an understanding of that. He keeps it a very high overview. I've read more books about this, and I could tell that I was reading like the kind of sanitized, like quick and dirty version of it. And so that, knowing that about the first part has me kind of questioning how much of a spark notes the other two parts are. And in that way, it kind of reminds me of this other nonfiction I've read, End of Policing, where you're not going to get tons of deep information about a topic. You're going to get like a wide array of very high level information about a topic. The second part of the book, where he talks about like empire in the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Hawaii and Alaska, and kind of brings you into the acquiring of these lands, and kind of World War II. For me, that was the most interesting part of the nonfiction. But the problem I kind of had with it was that I couldn't tell how he was trying to frame the book in terms of chronology, like order of operations, but in terms of like frame of context. Like sometimes it was kind of like colonization bad, and then other times it was like, is colonization bad? And that's just like kind of like a very general example, but like I kind of want, as a writer, I want you to kind of have a thesis that you're kind of guiding me through, and for me that requires you to have like a consistent belief set within your nonfiction, and then I can choose as a reader whether or not I agree with all of your opinions and takes. That didn't really feel like that was how he chose to write this, so it was just a bit muddled and confusing to me in terms of perspective. And then the second layer of that was like, it wasn't in chronological order, and it was kind of like he was also jumping all over the map, and I kind of didn't understand how he chose to structure part two. Because we would kind of be in one country and we'd be trickling into another, and then we were never comparing timelines of when things were occurring, so it was just a bit confusing in that regard. I would have rather him just taken a place and been like, we're in the Philippines, we're going to talk through the Philippines, we're going to go to Puerto Rico, and then we're going to compare Puerto Rico to the Philippines, and how the United States' relationship was, how it started, the continuity of it, how it ended or did not end or changed over time. And he never really conveyed those things in concise terms, which I think held the book back. Another thing is sometimes he would have takes that were just like very strange to me. Like, he has this whole thing about how the United States has, this is one of the ways he said, like, colonization equals, or empire equals good. This was one of his, where he never directly says, like, empire is good, but he goes to say, well, the United States had bases all over America, and they had one in Europe, or in Britain, in the UK, near where the Beatles were from, and the Beatles got their influences from 50s and 60s American music, which is true, but then he goes on to say, like, the Beatles couldn't exist without empire, so the United States is the reason the Beatles exist. It was just like, I was just like, all right, okay, dude. Like, it was just a weird, it was a weird way of conveying information. Anyway, I just found like things like that very bizarre, as like, this is the reason, like, empire is good. And it's like, well, yeah, the world is not black and white, but it just didn't really do what I thought he was intending for it to do. The last part on like the globalization kind of being the new empire and kind of having empire via influence, I also thought was quite interesting. I thought that it was, I thought that the way he conveyed it was positive at times. So overall, I'm very conflicted on how if I would recommend this book. I guess if you don't go into, like, if you don't know a lot about the United States as an empire, it is going to give you information. But if you already know enough and you want to dive deeper into topics, I don't think this is the way to go. All right, and then really quickly, the last book I read was Golden Fool by Robin Hobb. I can't really say much about this because it is the second book in the third trilogy in the realm of the Elderling. Overall, I'm just loving the series. I've been reading it with Mariana at Mariana Moss Books, and it's been a wonderful experience. We've actually finished this trilogy at this point, but we finished it in June, so I will talk about that in the next wrap-up. I think that in terms of the overall realm of the Elderling, for me, this was the most aimless book of Hobbs, where it didn't really feel like she had a complete plan of how she wanted the narrative to kind of be structured within the trilogy. When people say something is suffering from middle book syndrome, this is kind of what I think of, where it doesn't have its own kind of agenda. There's not like a overarching plot, and she's kind of trying to wrap things up from book 1 and then prepare you for book 3 without having its own kind of narrative focus. So even now, it's hard for me to remember what specific things occurred in this book. Personally, that wasn't really a problem for me because it had a lot of really slow moments of relationship and relationship building between characters. And for me, those are the parts of Hobbs' books that I really gravitate towards. I really love the relationship aspects and the relationship building. There's a lot about the magic systems in these books as well, and I love seeing the magic systems kind of develop over time. So I still really enjoyed and loved the book, but I also can understand why this might be people's least favorite. For those that do need a more consistent cadence to the narrative. But that is all I got for the month of May. My June wrap-up will not be this late. That is all I got, so until next time, happy reading.